Well, there is an article in New York Times that it says a good day for world peace. Biden signs aid bill for Ukraine and Israel. In your opinion, how this bill would help world peace, in your opinion?
Of course, funding war always helps peace, right, Nima? See, we can laugh at the stupidity of the New York Times for writing such a thing, but actually it's just part of the propaganda that war is peace. In other words, it's straight out of George Orwell's 1984. War is peace. So when we fund 3 wars, we get 3 times peace. The funding for Ukraine will keep that war going a while longer. The funding for Israel will keep the slaughter of the Palestinians going and the attacks on Iran going. And with the money to Taiwan, we're trying to start trouble with China. So we don't have that war going yet, but we're working on it. So clearly, the United States is under the power of the military security complex, which benefits from war, both profits from selling armaments, budgets from having threats, and power from having threats. The CIA's power very much depends on enemies. If you don't have any enemies, you don't need a police state, you see. So it just shows that Washington is still addicted to war. I mean, it has been since Clinton took office, right? We attacked Serbia, we destroyed Yugoslavia, we destroyed Libya, we destroyed Iraq, we attacked Syria, we attacked Afghanistan, we attacked Sudan, I think. It's kind of endless, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah. When we see this trip of Antony Blinken and Olaf Scholz, and they're trying to convince Chinese to not support Russia in the war in Ukraine.
right.
At the same time, you have passed a bill to send to Taiwan against China. How we can
Right.
put these two pictures together, in your opinion? What's the logic in this administration?
Well, I think there's no logic. There's just arrogance and confidence in American power. And so most likely Blinken was threatening China with sanctions or more sanctions unless they stop helping Russia in this conflict. I don't think China's help is important in the conflict with Ukraine. That conflict could be ended immediately if Putin would simply use the force. I think that China, like Putin, like Russia, thinks that if they just don't stir the pot, if they just don't overreact to the Western shenanigans, that everything will be all right and they can avoid a war. I think this is unrealistic. It's very self-deceiving. It's wistful thinking. Putin's pretense we're now into the 3rd year of this Ukrainian thing, and Putin still pretends it's a limited military operation. Well, it most certainly isn't. When you have NATO sending every kind of weapon system, including now, apparently this last batch of missiles are longer range for reaching deeper into Russia. They're not even battlefront weapons. therefore more embarrassment of Putin by strikes inside Russia. We have NATO personnel from almost all of the countries in Ukraine serving as advisors as they're doing targeting, they're doing intelligence. NATO's fully involved in the war, as is the United States, which funds it. So for Putin to pretend he has a limited military operation with the Ukrainians in the Donbass, he's deceiving himself. It's an inability to be realistic. He's at war with the West and the United States, and he refuses to acknowledge it. And so now we have talk of increasing talk. It's growing. The talk is growing of NATO troops. And we have the American division in Moldova, isn't it? It's in Moldova, Romania. So for him to pretend that, oh, this is a limited military operation is just stupid. It's ridiculous. And as I have said all these years, as you know, that Putin is causing the war to widen by refusing to end the war. If he would use the force sufficient to knock out Kiev, to knock out the government, and to occupy the country, to close it off, to put a government in power that's friendly to the Russians. He needs to do that before this thing continues to widen and then spirals out of control. And you see, it serves no purpose what he's doing to let this drag on if we now have the United States trying to wean China out of its relationship with Russia. So all of this Putin is bringing down on his own head. I don't understand it. It's so stupid. It is almost mindless. And it makes no sense. It makes me wonder, is he simply unable to accept that his limited military operation was a strategic blunder of the worst sort? And he can't admit he made a mistake, and so he won't correct it? Is that what's going on? I have no idea. Or do they have some deluded hope that sooner or later the West will see the light, will realize Ukraine can't win, and will agree for the conflict to end? Is that some sort of delusion that the Kremlin is suffering under? Well, if that's, why do they keep sending more weapons and more money? And why do the threats keep widening? Now it's not just Macron who talks about sending French troops. It's other countries are talking about it. And now we have Poland saying it's got to build the biggest army in Europe in order to defend against a Russian invasion. Well, the Russians aren't going to invade Poland. And we have the British Prime Minister, this Indian that now rules the English. And he says that we have to prepare, we have to dedicate our country to preparing for war with Russia, to defend ourselves from Russia. Well, you've got now war talk all over Europe. All of the European populations are now being prepared for war with Russia. Well, this never would have happened if Putin had done what he should have done, knocked Ukraine out, ended the conflict before anybody could get involved. It would have all been over with 2 years ago. Instead, it's spiraling out of control. It's getting more and more dangerous. So I don't know. I blame it on Putin. I mean, he could have avoided this. I don't mean by not coming to the aid of Donbass, but I mean by coming in realistically, realizing he had to get this war over with before the West used it against him, before the West got involved. Why he didn't realize that? It's so obvious. I can't explain it. I have no idea. I think it's leading to World War III.
I think so far we've learned that two main issues in Putin's mindset is so bold. One of them is less casualties on the part of Russians. He was always interested in having less casualties. And on the other hand, it seems that he's not interested in the western part of Ukraine. He's seeking some sort of political settlement for the western part of Ukraine.
Well, that's true. They don't have to show any interest in the western half of Ukraine to end the war. All they need to do is to take out Kiev and the government. And they should have occupied everything east of the Dnieper River. And they should have taken Kharkov and Odessa long ago. So all that should be there is the western part, and that should be sealed off. They should have sealed it off, sealed the border off, and put in a government friendly to Russia, like the government that was there before the United States overthrew it. So, why did he accept the American overthrow of the Russian friendly government in the first place? I never understood that. I think it's just because the Russians and Chinese are not realistic. They don't understand what they're up against. They think that somehow everything can be worked out. Now, the casualties that Putin didn't want to have also included the Ukrainians, or at least the Russian-speaking ones. And this was the excuse for not using heavy weapons when they had to take these towns and cities. They didn't want to kill the residents that they had come to rescue. But actually, the way the war's been conducted, more people have died, more Russian soldiers have been killed. Because instead of knocking out the capital and all the communication systems and all the airfields and all the power and just shutting down the place, killing the government and imposing themselves, which they could have done very quickly, 1 or 2 weeks, 3 at the most, there would have been minimum casualties. They didn't need troops to do that. And so actually the way he's fought the war has greatly increased casualties, not just of the Ukrainians. Look, the Russian Minister of Defense announced the other day that the Ukrainians had lost 500,000 men on the battlefield. That's a huge number of people to be killed in a little regional conflict. Moreover, half the population's left the country. I mean, the Ukraine is depopulated. They can't find anybody to put in the army. This is why I think the NATO troops are inevitable, because they've run out of men, and people aren't willing. The ones that are left aren't willing to fight, and most of them have left the country. And now there's talk about getting the Ukrainians who left, getting them sent back to Ukraine so they can be put in the front lines. Well, clearly Putin's goals have not been achieved. The opposite have been achieved, and the thing is spiraling further out of control. These new missiles were sent before the appropriation passed. So clearly they were going to send the weapons, whether or not the money got passed. Washington has many ways of sending the weapons. They can just have some NATO country buy them. They give the country a loan, and the NATO country transmits the weapons to Ukraine. But no, we didn't sell them to Ukraine. We sold them to Germany, or we sold them to Poland, or whatever. So it's not sensible. The way Putin has conducted this is out of control. And I think these new missiles, I think they're a longer range. And so it lets Ukraine strike deeper into Russia. Unless, of course, they simply can't penetrate the Russian air defenses.
Well, how much of this policy in Ukraine on the part of the Biden administration is related to the presidential election 2024 in the United States, in your opinion?
None,
No?
not at all.
So
It's not.
why they're insisting? Do you think, how about China? How about their policy on China? Because they think that if they let Russia defeat Ukraine, they're gonna have the same situation with Taiwan against China. How do you see that policy? Is that playing any role in this continuation of the war in Ukraine?
No, it plays no role. Look, Nima, remember from the very beginning, Putin said this is not an invasion of Ukraine. We are not invading Ukraine. We are rescuing Donbass from the Ukrainians. That's all we're doing. So we've always known there's no invasion of Ukraine, that Putin had no intention of taking Ukraine back into the Russian Federation, that he was simply to clear the American-built army out of Donbass. That's all he was doing. And he was only doing that because the Americans had deceived him for 8 years about the Minsk agreement. You know, Putin's plan was to leave the Donbass in Ukraine. That's what the Minsk agreement arranged. It left Donbass in Ukraine. It merely gave them some elements of autonomy so they could have their own police force, so that they couldn't be persecuted by the Ukrainians. And that's what the Minsk agreement was. That's all Putin wanted. And when Donbass initially requested to be taken back into Russia, he refused. Said no. So to try to pretend there's some kind of invasion of Ukraine when everything Putin said and did proves it's not an invasion of Ukraine, you know the Americans are lying intentionally, that it has a purpose. And the purpose is to widen this war into something bigger. Now, China has no intention of attacking Taiwan. Why should they attack Taiwan? They are, through economic interrelations, they are absorbing Taiwan. That's their way. Why go kill the people you're about to take over and just create animosity? They're conquering them slowly with economic interactions. And it will pay Taiwan to be part of China. And it's the United States that's trying to stop that, trying to create another conflict. They think that somehow conflicts will slow down the development of Russia and China. I doubt it. But that's the thinking in Washington. Somehow we can get them in a conflict and it drains the economy. They can't invest, and the high growth rates they're having, and they won't have the money for their Silk Road and their interrelationship, the Eurasian and Russian interaction with China and the Far East. They have all these delusions. They come out of American think tanks, which are not capable of thinking because they're all funded by the military security complex. They produce scenarios that the military security complex want in order to advance their own agendas. And so for Russia or China to take any of this seriously means they know nothing whatsoever about the United States. They're just completely ignorant that they have a zero intelligence service. Anybody could believe the kind of crap. I just got off an interview with the Russians. They have no clue. There's just no clue about anything. Why? I don't know. Maybe because they're so sick of communism, they believe the American propaganda. I just don't know. But I see the situation as where it's dangerous because the Chinese leader and the Russian leader are unrealistic. and they don't realize they're at war. And so they don't behave appropriately. And therefore, the provocations get worse. Look, there was no trouble with China or between China and Taiwan until the United States started it. When? 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, we started this trouble. That's where it came from. China didn't start the trouble. We started it, just like we started the trouble in Hong Kong some years before that. Well, it's not China starting the trouble. So clearly, we don't intend for them to be at peace. And if China is starting trouble, why provoke them more by sending military aid to Taiwan? What does Taiwan need with military aid? What good is it going to do? Taiwan, a tiny, tiny little place compared to China. It's a speck on a map compared to China. You know, here's China, Taiwan's a pinpoint somewhere. How can they go to war with China? I mean, they can't. And neither can we. So, you know, what's it about? It makes no sense. It's mindless. It's stupid beyond belief. I did see a report recently. It's by one of the top virologists, epidemiologists, the top medical scientists. It was one of those personalities, and what he said was he has concluded from his research that people who got the COVID shot have lost cognitive function and can't think clearly. Well, if the people in Washington were telling us the truth, the entire government got it. So the entire government can't think clearly. And I suppose the Russians got it too, and the Chinese got it too. There's nobody can think. Maybe that's the explanation. I mean, if this top medical scientist is right, and that the COVID vax, the mRNA vax disrupts your cognitive ability or damages it, and then people can't think clearly, well, that maybe is a situation. It was dangerous then. Very dangerous to have these powerful nuclear weapons and people can't think clearly. I don't know what the explanation is, but that could be one.
Paul, from what we've seen between Iran and Israel, we know that this attack on Israel cost Israel and the United States together with its allies $2.4 or $5 billion for 4 hours of defending Israel. And when it comes to this type of calculation and we translate this for the situation in Ukraine, we totally can understand what's going on in Ukraine and how NATO is running out of money, weapons in Ukraine, and why it's in this situation. Because the weapons they're using, everything they're using is so expensive. They cannot afford this. And right now you hear that Jens Stoltenberg said that we're going to increase, or the NATO countries will increase the defense budget from 2% to 2.5%. So what? What does it mean for the battlefield?
Well, nothing. You see, it's the expense of the weapons. That's fine for the military security complex who are pulling the strings. If you're an armaments manufacturer, an American armaments manufacturer, you're profiting from this. And the more expensive, the better. I mean, we even have planes now. Is it the F-35 that they can hardly get to fly, and they cost how many billions a piece? Each one, you know, and they're ineffective, but it's money. And so the government is not sitting there worrying about the cost. They're sitting there listening to the armaments manufacturers say, you want political campaigns for the election? Well, get some wars going. Give us some more money for weapons. Sell weapons. Get wars. That's the decision. It's not made on cost. It's made on appeasing the campaign contributors. The military security complex are huge campaign contributors, as are the Zionists, the Jews, the Israeli organizations, operations. They're massive contributors. And if you go against Israel, you don't get a cent. All the money goes to your opponent. And this is how Israel has filled up the Congress with people who are very, very obedient to Israel. You can't, if you go against Israel, you're out. They use the money to defeat you. And a lot of senators and representatives who have been removed have said that. They've said that's what happens. If you even make an honest criticism of them, they get rid of you. So these are the things that are making the decisions, Nima, not some professor sitting there being reasonable or trying to work out what makes sense. What makes sense to them is money, power. The cost of it is irrelevant to them. They're not interested in the cost of it. It will have no effect on any decision. Cost, none, zero effect.
Paul, do you think that these new members, Finland and Sweden, would be, can we say that they are the new customers of the military industrial complex of the United States?
Yeah. Yeah, they've got new customers. That's right. And the power, the pressure will be put on both of those countries to get their own arms in line with NATO's arms, which means largely American weapons, and to now spend enough money to make their required contribution to NATO's defense of Europe. So yes, it's two new customers. And it's going to cost both countries, whereas previously they were in no threat whatsoever from Russia. Russia was not going to attack Sweden or Finland. Now they face attack, more of a nuclear attack, because by joining, they greatly expanded NATO's frontier on Russia. It's now a huge frontier. It was already huge, but now it's mega huge. Well, Russia can't station troops along a frontier that big, particularly now as it goes into Central Asia to Georgia, you know. And so what it means is the few cities of any significance in Sweden and Finland will simply disappear if there's a war. They'll be nuked. They won't be there, and thereby the countries won't be there. You lose the main centers of communication and power, and you're finished. So it's a ridiculous decision that both countries made. They face no threat, none, and now they face immense threat. So why did they do it? Did Washington go over and ask the leading figures of the two governments, how much money do we have to pay you to join NATO? I suspect that's what happened. And I suspect if there were any honest investigative reporters who were not in fear of their lives, they probably find out that there's a whole bunch of now mega millionaires in Sweden and Finland who have been paid by the Americans to join. That's the way things work. I mean, how else can you explain political leaders putting their countries in jeopardy for no reason? They were paid. They were bought. It's the way the U.S. has always operated. Anybody that's been in the government knows that. So,
Paul, it seems that in Georgia they're cooking a new color revolution. And do you think if something happens in Georgia, Russia would react as we saw in Ukraine?
See, if it does happen and it's against the Russian interest, it's another illustration of why Putin was so stupid to let this war continue. Because then he'll have a war there, a war here. It looks like one may be coming up with NATO and Belarus. You know, the Belarus president has said NATO is preparing to attack us. Well, that's where Russian nuclear missiles are, in Belarus. Well, so Putin's got 3 wars. See? For long, he'll have 4. And it's all because he refuses to use the force necessary to win in Ukraine. He lets it drag on and on. Okay, so let's start another one. Oh, we can't let Ukraine be a member of NATO. So he's got 2 new members, Sweden and Finland, which are far more dangerous. You know, you really have to be inattentive or unrealistic to be in the dominant position and yet to see yourself continually weakened. And they think, oh, see, we're strong. We're beating them on the battlefield. How? By losing casualties, by dragging out a war they could have ended 2 years ago. I don't know. It makes no sense to me. The question is, what can he do? Can you send another army there? Then you'll have to mobilize more, and then there'll be domestic opposition. You see, Putin is playing totally in American hands. He's totally playing into their hands. Everything he does plays into their hands. Particularly now, if what you're reporting to me, I didn't notice it, that there's trouble brewing in Georgia. You mean the sort of neutral government he left there from that previous war is now going to be overthrown? We'll get another anti-Russian government there. Well, then that's just another consequence of Putin's delay, of Putin's unrealistic assessment of the situation. I still, you know, I saw a few months ago a couple of realistic assessments by 2 Russian academics, and I reported them. And I thought, well, maybe things would change. You know, all of this sounds like I'm on Russia's side. No, what my view is that it's the indecision of Putin, the lack of resoluteness that's leading to nuclear war. I'm trying to avoid nuclear war. And I'm not just arguing for a Russian victory in Ukraine because I'm on Russia's side. I'm arguing because we've got to stop this thing before it continues to spiral. And sooner or later, he's going to have to respond. And then, as you said, it will be nuclear. They simply haven't got the forces, conventional forces in terms of troops, to defend that massive border. It's just a huge border with NATO. You know, they're not just, this time they won't just be fighting Germany. They'll be fighting everything from the Baltic to Central Asia. So it's deadly. It's a deadly situation that's developing, and it's that I'm against. And I think the only thing that can stop it from continuing to spiral out of control, and clearly it has been spiraling out of control, just as I said it was going to. It has. The only thing that can stop it is he has to end this Ukrainian war quickly before. Look, once there are NATO troops in there fighting, he's at war. He can't pretend it's a limited military operation if there are NATO troops in the front line. We see this creeping further. It's not just Macron talking about it now. And it's all of Europe preparing for war with Russia. Well, why is he going to wait? He has the ability now. When the whole West is prepared, he won't. So the whole thing is nonsensical. To try to talk about it, make sense of it, it doesn't make sense. It's impossible to understand the reaction of the Chinese leader, the reaction of the Russian leader, and for that matter, the reaction of the Iranian leader. Let me talk about that just for a minute. A lot of people have made the point that, okay, now Iran has let Israel know it can attack Israel. The drones weren't meant to get through. They were just meant to draw off all the fire from the American ships and the Iron Dome. It was the missiles that were sent later, and apparently some were hypersonic. You can't block those. So they got in and they hit some air base that is allegedly very important and was secret. And they did some kind of damage there. Well, this clearly told Israel, hey, they can actually hit us. We're not protected. Well, what the hell was the purpose of that? Why did the Iranians let the Israelis know they can hit them? You should never let an enemy know that. You should just hit them, take them out. You don't say, hey, look, oh, not only that, apparently the Iranians gave him 6 hours advance warning. Well, it's mindless. It's mindless. It's totally mindless. So now the Israelis know, hey, look, these guys can, well, they'll find some way against it. Or they'll decentralize things, or the airplanes on the ground will continually be shifted around, so nobody ever knows where they are or whatever. So I tell them in advance. It just told me again, look, here are people under direct attack. They won't attack back. Instead, they reveal all their abilities, which let their enemies learn how to protect against them. Well, the minute Iran did that, I said, that guy's lost his mind. The Iranians have gone completely stupid. What do they think they've achieved? Greater Israel is still there. You have to remember, it was not long ago, a month or two, that Netanyahu held up the maps in front of the cameras. Greater Israel, from the Nile to the Euphrates, parts of Egypt, all of Syria, all of Yemen, Iraq, and half of Iraq, all the way to the Euphrates. That's half of Iraq. Well, and Jordan. So that's greater Israel. So what's in their way? Iran. The Saudis can't do anything. Look, the Saudis are another example of complete and total stupidity. The decades and decades and decades of their oil profits, where are they? They're in U.S. Treasury bonds in Washington. The minute the Saudis piss off Washington, poof, they're confiscated. They're no longer rich. They haven't got a cent. Oh, what in the world would you do that for? I mean, they think, oh, Americans would never do this to us. Why wouldn't they? Why? They'll never do it to you as long as you kowtow to them and do what you're told to do. But the minute you try to do, and in the meantime, what the Saudis do, they load themselves up with Palestinian workers because the Saudis don't want to work. So they got all these Palestinians there who could protest, who actually could probably cause a revolt, maybe overthrow the government. And so now how are they going to appease them? They can't, because if they appease them, we're going to get pissed off. If they appease us, the Palestinians are going to get pissed off. If you look at the stupidity of leadership and the situation they put themselves in, I think maybe that's what Washington is banking on. It's just banking on these people are dumb. They don't understand we're out to get them. Maybe that's the explanation. Maybe Washington says, no, we don't have to worry about them. They don't even recognize a threat.
When Iran attacked Israel, Biden said to Israel that he's not supporting Israel to respond to Iran. In your opinion, why he decided to do that? What was in his mind?
And maybe he was just off script. But first of all, you got to understand, Biden doesn't make any decisions. The decisions are made for him, and he reads them. And maybe he was just off script, or maybe he was just saying that we're going to help you, but we're not going to admit it. That's probably, you see, when he says something like that, here's how I would explain it. We are helping them, but we're not going to admit it, so we deny it, and we make it look like we're opposed. But we've already told Netanyahu that we're not. You see, we've been wanting to attack Iran for decades, the longest time. The entire Congress, the Republicans, the Democrats, they all want to attack Iran because Israel wants us to. And the neoconservatives have been running the foreign policy. So, and they're all Jewish and allies with Israel. So we want Iran. We want Iran gone. It's a problem to us. And moreover, if we can get the Iranian government overthrown, the CIA can send its jihadists directly into Russia, right into the Russian Federation. There are Muslim elements there, and we can start off more agitation for the Russians. Maybe another internal war, like with the Czechs. So it all fits the notion of the unipolar world, American hegemony. So that would be my explanation. What surprises me is that people take these statements at face value. There's always a mistake. No politician ever means what he's saying. It's not the purpose of saying something. But it makes it look like, okay, we're not involved, but we are. They'll use our missiles, our bombs, our intelligence. How else are they going to do it? They can't even attack Gaza without our missiles and our bombs. And, we're against that, blah, blah, but we keep sending the missiles and the bombs.
This vast demonstration in the United States against Israel and what they're doing in Gaza. And recently, Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House, said that Russia is playing a role in this protest against Netanyahu, against Biden and his administration and their policy in Gaza. The point in this talk of Nancy Pelosi is that Putin is doing this in the United States because he wants to help Donald Trump to win the 2024. These protests
who cares? Who cares? What is it important? Every head of government of every country always hopes that somebody wins instead of somebody else. I mean, was Churchill happy when Hitler won? Was Hitler happy when Churchill won the prime ministership? The United States was not happy when de Gaulle became president of France. We're very unhappy. Why? He wouldn't join NATO. He stood up to us. He says, I don't want your dollars. Give me the gold. He forced the United States off the gold standard. Everybody had, look, the president of Colombia and the president of Venezuela, they don't like each other. One each wishes the other was gone. Well, what does it matter who Putin wants to win? It's a stupid thing. Stupid. It shows, people who dream up this crap are either doing it to keep everybody confused so they can't figure out what's going on. Oh, they're just stupid themselves. It's irrelevant who Putin wants to win. So, look, the Democrats will steal it just like they did the last two. I read this morning that 3 Democratic governors, Arizona, Wisconsin, and I forget the third, but 3 of the governors just vetoed all of the election integrity bills the legislatures had passed. So, and these are Wisconsin, Arizona, and the other state, they are swing states. They're the crucial states that always determine which wins, Democrat or Republican. And so the governors of the states currently are Democrat, they vetoed the election integrity bills. Well, why? Because they don't want any election integrity because they're going to steal the election. That's what's going to happen. So the notion that the people decide the election by voting is ridiculous. And since the Democrats succeeded in stealing the 2020 election, the 2022 election, they're emboldened. Moreover, and the whole world needs to understand this, the people who brought forth the evidence that the elections were stolen, the experts who provided the hard evidence, they were prosecuted for election interfering. In other words, they have now criminalized protesting a stolen election. So who's going to protest it this time? This is what the Democrats know. In fact, right now, there are 19 Republican lawyers who are being prosecuted for felony interference of an election simply because they examined the evidence that it was stolen. Others are being prosecuted, including that Trump lawyer, Sidney Powell, the woman. She was one of the ones bringing the evidence of the theft of the 2020 election. She is being prosecuted for saying the election was stolen. So you can't even complain if they steal the election. So what's to stop them? The media? Why would the media immediately, when it was clear the election was stolen, no stolen election, no stolen election. So, the election, it'll be stolen. Or if it's not, they simply won't let Trump take office. We already have a Democratic congressman has introduced a bill that if Trump is convicted in one of these Democratic courts with black juries, if he's convicted, then he loses his Secret Service protection. Because right now it's kind of hard to figure out how you put the president in jail when under US law, he has to have round-the-clock Secret Service protection. Well, if they put him in jail and they take away his Secret Service protection, he'll be killed in jail. They often put people in jail so to have them killed. They want them dead, but they can't bring a charge serious enough for the death sentence. And so they just convict them and then they get killed in the jail. This is a common way the American government gets rid of undesirables. Look what happened to Epstein, right? You remember Epstein, the child porn guy? Okay, well, they claim he committed suicide. He's in a suicide-proof cell. For some reason, all the cameras are turned off. For some reason, the guards aren't there. And he committed suicide. No evidence. Why were the cameras turned on? Where were the guards? They were stationed right there, supposed to be right outside the cell. So this is the line. Well, he was put in jail to kill because he had the book with all the politicians' names and all the people who had flown to the island and had sex with children. So we got to get rid of him. So that's what they do when they put people like that in prison. They put him in to kill him. He was killed in the prison, officially murdered. Well, that's what they want to do to Trump. And so this Democrat has put a bill in that, and they can convict Trump. Of course, eventually it would be overturned on appeal, but they can deny him bail while he's appealing and put him in jail. And so by the time the appeal gets to the court, he's dead in jail. Oh, Trump was despondent and committed suicide. He was so despondent. And so, people are so unrealistic. They have no comprehension of anything. Anything works or what. They think what somebody says means something. It doesn't. It means the opposite. Or it's a way of dragging red herons across the trail. That means to confuse everybody. And I don't think that.
Paul, before wrapping this session, I want to ask one more question is about Africa and what's going on right now. In Niger, they're asking the United States to withdraw the American troops from Niger. And it seems that they reach an agreement that the United States would take out these troops. And on the other hand, we had in Chad as well, the United States is going to withdraw some of their troops in Chad and other African countries. How do you see the situation right now with France, right now with the United States in Africa?
See, the question is, what the hell were United States troops and French troops doing in these independent countries? Why were they there? What kind of stupid African government let them there? Probably somebody paid. Why are they being withdrawn? Well, it looks like we're against the president in Niger, and he probably figures we're going to overthrow him, like we've overthrown so many African leaders. And so he wants them out. That's my best guess. Why did we agree? I don't know. Maybe we didn't have enough troops to go to war. I don't know. Or maybe it's not important to us. We're focused on the Middle East, and we're focused on Ukraine, and now possibly Belarus and Georgia and Taiwan, and Africa is just low down the totem pole. And why do the Africans want the French out? I don't know. Maybe they're just tired of it, or maybe they see better opportunities with the Chinese, and are therefore afraid France will overthrow them, or that we will overthrow them. The Chinese and the Russians are approaching Africa in a non-military way. They're approaching them. They're not saying, can we have bases for our troops and all that? Why they need troops there? They're saying, we want to do business with you. And they rely on business to get influence. We rely on occupation. We still occupy Japan and Germany after World War II. I mean, there are practically no veterans left of World War II. It was so long ago. When you talk about it to young people, they don't know what it is. What was World War II? They don't know. They really don't. What war was that? So maybe that's the explanation. I don't know anything about Africa other than we overthrow governments. Now, the reasons we did it in the past was, I know two reasons. One was we thought some of them were too cozy with the Soviet Union, with communists. And the other is they had resources and we wanted to control the resources and they wanted to keep control in their hands. And for example, oil, we want to control the oil. And they said, no, we want to. And so we would overthrow them and then the next government would let us control them. So it's over control of resources or it's over some political thing. But that's my explanation to that, Neiman. I'm not knowledgeable about Africa, but the troubles in Chad and Sudan have been going a long time. I can remember back, when was it? 1979. I was editor at the Wall Street Journal, and I wrote an editorial about Chad. Then, well, that was what, 10, 20, 30, 45 years ago. 45 years ago, we were mucking around in Chad then. And we've been mucking around in Sudan a long time. Remember, they made a movie, Hollywood made a movie about the Americans, troops there that got killed and dragged through the streets. I forget what the name of the movie was, but it was a long time ago. So how long have we been mucking around there? And what was the point of it? What did it achieve? I have no idea. Just, I don't remember my editorial of why I wrote it about Chad, but I remember writing it. And I might see if I can find it and read it and see. So who knows? I'm very worried that Russia, China, and Iran are unrealistic. They don't realize the threat. They don't realize that but by exercising so much restraint, they are inviting more and worse provocations. You've heard this from me almost every time we talk. And that they simply don't have any judgment. They're unrealistic. And I think it's proven. It's proven to be true. I mean, the situation in Ukraine is increasingly dangerous. And it makes no sense to me whatsoever that Russia, China, and Iran have not announced in a joint press conference a mutual defense treaty. If Russia, China, and Iran announced, all three leaders stand up, we now have a mutual defense treaty. An attack on one is an attack on all. That would do more than anything to put the world at peace. That would stop so much of this crap, because Israel is not going to attack Iran, and neither are we, if it means we're going to war with Russia and China at the same time. And we are not going to be in a position that we are attacking Russia by our proxy, Ukraine, if it means we're at war with Iran and China. I mean, Iran can close down the Persian Gulf. China can close off the whole Southeast Asian Sea, the China Sea out there. I mean, it's amazing. China could just bring the country here to a halt because all of our manufacturing is in China. How can we go to war with China? They make the parts for our military vehicles. It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, so but why don't they do this? It's just so obvious. You stop all the troubles everywhere. Okay, there's a mutual defense treaty, Russia, China, Iran. That would be the biggest step toward peace that could be taken. then, these European countries are tiny, tiny compared to those territories. They're going to say, what the hell are we thinking? No. Start telling the Americans no. I mean, the Japanese would start saying, we are allied with the wrong people. So, but it doesn't happen. And why? Oh, it would be provocative. Oh, provocative? Peace? Peace would be provocative. Right? I'm sure Putin thinks it would be a very provocative and irresponsible thing to do. It would solve all his problems in one fell swoop. But, it's provocative. And of course, the Chinese, they don't want to provocative. They think that somehow they're going to take over everything just through economics and being. But they can't stop fighting with India. I mean, can you imagine anything more stupid than that? I mean, what a wedge that is for Washington. I mean, whatever's on that border, they should just sit down and say, okay, you want it and I want it, so let's just split it in half and let it go at that. I mean, it's kind of mindless. It's a wedge. And like I say, our opponents look to be so mentally incompetent and unrealistic that it encourages Washington to be more aggressive. The opponents just don't seem to have a clue about anything. Just imagine Putin, this powerful military, letting himself be made an example of a failure for 2 years in the Western press. Russia's being defeated. They'll fall tomorrow. And this is in the London Daily Telegraph. It's in the Guardian, the New York Times, the Washington Post, all the think tanks, all the Russian experts saying this. Russia's finished. What good does this do Putin? It didn't save any lives. It just means he's going to lose a lot more in more wars.